Good morning, everyone. Hello, Andy, Jerry, Ryan, Kevin, Ella, and Gleam Tech. But I think that was James. And hello, Jens. And good morning, Bhante Suddhāso. Thank you for sharing the Dhamma with us once again. Oh, Julia and Adriana are also saying hello. Good to see you online. So today's the second day of our weekend retreat on the six elements meditation. So if you have any kind of question before we start with the day, you're welcome to put it in the live chat so Bhante can address any question straight away. Otherwise, we can proceed with whatever Bhante has in mind for the morning. I see some other friends who have joined us and are saying hello. Hi, Scott. Hi, Matthew, Junie, Nora, Victoria, and Sally. This is so great. I'm so happy to see you morning and night, and afternoon and morning, and afternoon and night, and morning again, and night again. This is great. I rejoice in your good practice. All right. Well, it doesn't seem like there are any questions coming up in the live chat. So maybe Bhante, thank you.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sangham namasami.
Actually, Sally just asked a question. So, hi, Yudi. Sally's asking, for air elements, I have anxiety when breathing out. And there might be a second part of the question and that will pop up. Because when breathing out, the breathing is not smooth.
So first off, I'd just like to say that experiencing...
maybe there are other parts, sorry. As breath in, it's coming up in little parts. I don't know if you want to address it already or if you want to wait for the whole kind of question to come up.
Well, if she's still typing, I can read.
Well, in the meanwhile, I'll say hello, Tin. Quite a few people this morning saying hello.
Okay, well, I'll just address whatever she has there. So first off...
Oh, sorry. She said, sorry, I just mean breath out is not smooth as breathe in.
So first off, you mentioned anxiety while breathing out. I'd like to mention that experiencing anxiety while focusing on one's breathing during meditation is not uncommon. So I had that problem quite a lot in the early days, which is one of the reasons why I've never spent much time doing breath meditation. But as I mentioned last night, for me, breath meditation and the air element meditation are distinctly different things. Because with the air element meditation, we're not focusing on the sensation of breathing as we are focusing on the experience of the air element circulating through the body and the inseparability of the internal and external air element. So the breath itself is not of much interest, except that it helps to direct our attention towards the feeling of the air element. As for the breath not being smooth as it goes out, now, are you controlling your breath as it goes out? Usually the natural, smooth, automatic breathing of the body, like the automatic breathing of the body, is usually quite smooth and even. So usually if there's any unevenness or harshness in the breathing, it's because we're taking control of the process somewhat. But sometimes uneven breathing is just normal. It's just the way the body is breathing. In which case, we just accept that this is just what the breathing feels like. So it's not good or bad, it's just what the breathing feels like. So if the breath is not smooth on the way out, well, then it's not smooth on the way out, and that's okay. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong. It just means that the breath is not smooth on the way out. So we don't need to make a problem out of it. So we just continue focusing, in particular, focusing on the feeling of the breath, not of the breath itself, but of the feeling of the air circulating through the body. So really trying to get a felt, tangible experience of the body inflating and deflating, felt, tangible experience of the air blowing through the body. That's what we're really interested in with this meditation. And as I mentioned yesterday to another questioner, if you're having trouble with the breath aspect of the air element, you can also focus on how the air feels on your skin. That's another way of starting to relate to the air element, though it's quite a bit more subtle. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, we do. Thank you, Bhante. Oh, and hello, Key. We have our friend from Australia.
Great.
So he says, good morning, evening here down under. And hello, Peter and Marielle. So Yudi says, I experienced disgust of the body when doing the water element. Is this normal?
It's not uncommon. So another one of our residents here yesterday mentioned having the same experience. So that's something that's worth looking at more closely. What is this disgust? Why is it that we find the watery aspects of the body disgusting? Because they're perfectly natural. In fact, they're necessary for your body to function correctly. It's kind of like a car. A car has gas and oil in order to function correctly. So it has these watery components. Has windshield fluid, and it has radiator fluid, and it has antifreeze. And there's all kinds of liquids that are necessary for a car to operate correctly. And if any one of those liquids is missing or impure, then the car doesn't work right and might not work at all. So it's the same. Our body has a variety of liquids which are necessary for it to operate correctly. So those liquids are not disgusting. They're not foul. They're not gross. These are value judgments that we place upon them. And these value judgments that we place upon them are arbitrary. So there's nothing inherently disgusting about sweat or blood or pus or urine. These are just natural parts of the functioning of the body, natural things that keep the body working smoothly and comfortably. And in fact, if any of these things were missing from the body, it would be very uncomfortable. And in fact, you would probably die within a short period of time. So the watery aspects of the body, they're nothing to be disgusted by because they're actually what keeps the body functioning smoothly and properly. So it's important also when we're practicing any kind of meditation of this sort to recognize that what we're looking at is simply natural elements of the world. We're just looking at things that are exactly the way they're supposed to be, things that are exactly the way they're meant to be, things that are exactly as they are. So to reject them, to be disgusted by them, is just as silly as to be enamored with them. Because they just are what they are. They're not They're not inherently good or bad. That's just extra that we add to it. So developing this calm, clear knowing of our experience without judgment, without judging it as pleasant or unpleasant, without judging it as beautiful or gross, without judging it as appealing or disgusting. But just acknowledging this is what the body feels like. Uh, Depending on how we approach it, the body seems solid, or it seems watery, or it seems hot, or it seems airy. Uh, and these are just different aspects of the bodily experience. But none of them are inherently disgusting, and none of them are inherently appealing either. It's just nature, it's just natural. So it's like the earth. The earth has a lot of dirt and rocks, and there's streams and rivers that flow between the stones and over the dirt, and but we don't think that's disgusting. In fact, people tend to find that quite pleasant. Well, it's the same with your body. Your body has the dirt-like components, and then there's the water-like components that flow over and around the dirt-like components. So your body is like a little planet. It's got its dirt components, it's got its water components, it's got its heat components, it's got its air components, just like the earth, just like a planet. So we don't find it disgusting when it's out in nature. So there's no reason to find it disgusting in bodies either. It's just the same thing. Okay?
And Sally says, getting back to her previous question, maybe it's habits. When I feel the air out from the abdomen, it sometimes interrupts, stops, then air out again. Maybe I can just feel air going in and out of chest rather than the whole body.
You can experiment with different ways. As long as you have a clear perception of the air element, um, doesn't really matter so much exactly how you're going about doing it. Um, I recommend doing the whole body mainly because that makes it easier than developing the anatta sanya, the perception of not self. If your attention is too narrow, then it's more difficult to get the perception of not self going well, in my experience. Um, Again, as far as your breath catching or interrupting or stopping on the out breath, well, if that's what it is, that's what it is. So also being willing to come to a peaceful acceptance that this is what it feels like. And it's okay. Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. And we have a friend from Uruguay. Hello,
Mm.
Rafa. I love how Buddhist Insights is so international, even online. And Kevin says, what's behind the ease or challenge one has toward practice with a given element? Is it karma?
I mean, everything is karma. Everything is karma. So that kind of dodges the question. Uh, yeah, everything is karma because affinity with a particular element depends upon the choices you've made in the past. So why do I have a strong affinity with the fire element? I don't know. Um, but it indicates that something I've done in the past means that that's my affinity. That's what I connect with more easily. So I tend to connect fairly easily with the earth element and the fire element. The water and the air are more challenging for me. But for other people, it's different. For other people, they find the water element really easy and they find the fire element really challenging, or they find the air element very easy and the other three challenging. So yeah, it depends upon how we've directed our mind in the past. If we've directed our mind in ways that are more associated with watery things or more associated with airy things, then those elements will be easier for us. Um, If we've associated more with fiery things, then the fire element will be easier for us. If we've associated more with solid things, then the earth element will be easier for us. So it just has to do with how we've habitually tended to direct our mind in the past. So yes, that's karma. Yeah. Karma is the residue of our past habits.
Just a follow-up, is it better for us to develop what we associate less so that we can be more balanced on feeling all different components?
Jennifer is asking if it's better to develop what we have less of an affinity for, so it can be more balanced for all the components. And that's one perspective. And the approach that I've been giving so far is to focus on one element at a time. So whichever element you're focusing on, you work on getting a clear familiarity with that element, whether it's easy for you or hard for you. If you're doing the water element, then you just do the water element. And you don't worry about whether it's easy or hard or whether other ones are easier for you or not. But outside the context of this step-by-step training that I've been giving, then it's perfectly fine to pick and choose. And in that case, you make a decision. You decide, do I want to do what's easy and get strong meditation because it's easier for me? Or do I want to build up proficiency in an area that I'm weak in which case you would pick one of the ones that's more challenging for you and work on getting more skill with that area. So that's a judgment call that you make for yourself. But I would say that it's good to try to be at least minimally proficient in all of the elements, because that will give you a complete picture of your experience. If you focus entirely on one element, then your awareness of your experience will be quite lopsided and imbalanced. Okay? Any other questions coming in?
I think that's all for now.
Okay, so in that case, today we'll start approaching the space element. You should be excited. So the first four elements, earth, moisture, heat, and wind. So earth, water, fire, and air. The first four elements are all related to physical objects or physical contact with things. And all of this is related to physical objects that are located in space. So, for example, in the room that we're in right now, there are solid objects. So I see a chair, I see a table, I see a lamp, I see a tapestry, I see some bodies. So these are all earth-like things in the room. The bodies are wet. They're filled with all kinds of moisture and gooey things, which is not disgusting. It's just the nature of bodies. They have wet, gooey parts. In fact, the entire body is wet and gooey, and that's totally okay. Totally fine. It's kind of like applesauce. Nobody complains that the applesauce is wet and gooey because that's part of what makes applesauce good. Nobody complains that the ice cream is wet and gooey because that's what makes ice cream good. So similarly, there's no reason to complain that our body is wet and gooey because that's what makes it comfortable to inhabit. So we see the water element in these wet, gooey bodies. We see the heat element. So we can feel the heat element radiating from our bodies and from the other bodies and from the heating elements of the building and from the light bulbs and so on. And the air element. So the air element filling the room, which we should all be quite grateful for because without it, it's terribly hard to breathe. So we're aware of these four elements, but all of that is happening in space. All of that is in a vast field of space. And space itself is not hindered by the objects that move through it. And the objects that move through, the objects are not hindered by the space. So objects do not hinder space, and space do not hinder objects. So one of the qualities of space then is that it allows all physical objects without obstructing them. And space itself is not obstructed or damaged or altered by the objects in it. So one way of starting to approach this is, again, it's like a painting. So this is a metaphor that I used the other day, and I don't remember what I was using it for. But one example is like a painting. So normally when we look at a painting, we're fixating on the paint. But the paint is on a surface. The paint is on a canvas, or the paint is on paper, or the paint is on a stone surface, or the paint is on wood. The paint is on something. It's on a surface of some kind. And normally we don't pay much attention to the surface because we're so fixated on the paint. Similarly, we normally don't pay any attention to space because we're fixated on the objects that are in space. In fact, often we don't even notice the air element because we're fixated on earth, water, and heat. In fact, often we don't even notice the heat element because we're fixated on earth and water, which is why there's this progression. So earth and water are the obvious ones. Heat is here. It's tangible. You can feel it, but it's not solid in the way that earth and water are. It's not as substantial. Air. So again, everything in this room that's not occupied by solid matter or by water is occupied by air. So actually, most of the space in this room is taken up by air. The earth and water aspects of the room are actually quite minimal by comparison. Probably less than 10%. Probably even less, quite a bit less than 10% of this room is filled with solid things. Most of it's air. But even the air is in space. Everything is in space. So we're looking beneath or behind the objects at the space itself. The vast openness through which all these objects are moving, in which all these objects appear and vanish. So the space element, it is all pervasive. It's spread evenly throughout the entire universe. It is unobstructed. It's not disturbed or bothered by the objects. And it's unobstructing. It doesn't inhibit the presence, movement, or absence of of objects. So feeling the space element can be a little bit challenging because it's something which, by definition, does not respond to touch. So the other elements you can touch, you can feel it through touch. Space element, one is aware of it not through touch, but through bringing awareness to the space that is occupied by your body. So this is something which we are aware of all the time. So spatial awareness. So three-dimensional spatial awareness is something which is necessary for such a simple activity as walking across the room. So without spatial awareness, it's actually impossible to function in the world at all. So we have spatial awareness all the time. We're just mostly not consciously aware of it. We're mostly operating with spatial awareness on a subconscious level. But it's something that we all have. We have the ability to be aware of space, the ability to be aware of objects moving through space and of the underlying space. So developing the meditation on the space element, often the easiest way to do this is to start by bringing awareness to the first 4 elements. So being clearly aware of the physical, tangible objects. And then gently bring your mind to the space occupied by the objects. Again, often the easiest place to start is with your own body. So right here where your body is sitting, there is a body-shaped region of empty space. Right here. So you can feel it if you pay close enough attention. And this is starting to blur the domain, blur the edges between body and mind. When we move into the space element, we're already starting to touch a bit more closely the nature of mind. So as we bring attention to the space occupied by the body, we're not paying attention to the earth, water, heat, or air elements. We're not paying attention to the solidity of the body. We're not paying attention to the physicality of the body. We're paying attention to the space occupied by the body. So a vaguely body-shaped region of space right here where the body is. And once we're firmly aware of the space occupied by the body, then we can recognize that the space occupied by the body is indistinguishable from and inseparable from all the space in the universe. Because how could there possibly be lines and boundaries in space? How can you possibly divide off one part of space from another? It's just not possible. And even this body is moving through space at all times. Various astronomers have tried to calculate exactly how fast we're moving through space. And it turns out that we're moving through space ridiculously fast. We think we're holding still, but we're not. We're actually moving through space at hundreds of millions of kilometers per hour. This body is hurtling through space incredibly quickly. So even the space occupied by the body, well, the body is moving very rapidly through space. So it's not even in the same region of space for more than a split second. It's always moving through space. So there's not any part of space that we can say is ours, and there's not any part of space that we can say is me. There's just the space element, which is all pervasive, unobstructive, and unobstructed. So at this time, we can do some meditation on the space element. So please come into meditation posture if you're not already in meditation posture.
And there is a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Marielle is asking, so space is the same inside the atmosphere than outside? Is the space element the container of everything there is?
Yes, correct. Yeah, so don't mix up the space element and the air element, because air still has density, it has substance. So the air element is also contained within the space element.
Okay. And Melvin and Trina are asking, now I'm curious about the room that you're in. Is there a picture of it? Or if it's not too much trouble, could you show it?
Well, it's on the live stream right now. Anyway,
do a panorama?
No, silliness. No, you don't need to know. Just look at your own room. All rooms are the same. There's some wet, gooey stuff, and some solid stuff, and some warm stuff, and some air, and it's all in space. This describes every single room in the entire planet. So, coming into your meditation posture, unless there's more questions.
Just Sally is asking one last thing. Could Bhante explain the part of edge of mind and space again?
We will get to that. The mind, we'll get to that when we talk about consciousness element, which will be this afternoon. So for now, let's just focus on space element. And that little bit of foreshadowing will just lurk and eat away at the corner of your mind for the next couple hours. And then we'll talk about it at 1:30. So come into meditation posture, sitting up nice and straight. Take a few deep breaths, letting the body and mind relax with each breath. Starting by settling attention in your body. Bringing attention to the solid, heavy, earth-like aspect of the body. Like the body is large stone, heavy, solid, immobile. Bringing attention to the watery aspect of the body. The moisture saturating the whole area of the body. So feeling the body as a container of circulating water. Feeling it as a swirling cloud of dense fog. Feeling it as fountain or waterfall in a garden. Feeling the water element of the body. Feeling the heat element of the body. Feeling the body like a radiant star. Feeling it like a blazing ball of fire. Feeling the fire element. Feeling its heat, its warmth. And feeling the air element of the body. Like a balloon inflating and deflating. Feeling the air element circulating through the body. Like wind blowing through a canyon. Feeling the body made up of these four elements: earth, water, fire, and air, solidity, moisture, heat, and wind. And bring attention to the empty space occupied by the body. The body shaped region of empty space right where you're sitting. Feeling the empty space occupied by the body. Noticing its openness, its unobstructiveness. It freely holds whatever moves through it without impeding, without hindering. So keep coming back to the space element. When you catch the mind starting to fixate on one of the previous four elements, immediately release it, let it go. Direct attention to the underlying space. And in that space, there are no edges, there are no boundaries. So there's no division between the space occupied by the body and the space occupied by the rest of the room. There's no division between the space occupied by the room and the space occupied by the whole planet. There's no division between the space occupied by the planet and the space occupied by the whole universe. It's just one indivisible field of space. There's no inside, no outside, just space. Not me, not mine, just space. Vast, open space. Not me, not mine, just space. Extending limitlessly in all directions. Vast open space. No edges, no borders, no boundaries, just space. No me, no mine, no self, no other, just space. Relax your posture. You can do a bit of stretching. Take a few seconds just to rest in the peacefulness of the mind. And when you're ready, if you have questions or comments or anything you'd like to be explained or discussed, please type them in and I'll address your comments and questions at this time.
Thank you, Bhante. So there is a comment from a new friend called Simon. And he says, Nibbana Dhatu, the sphere of Nibbana, How about this seventh element, the sphere in which none of the worldly elements can arise? If this didn't exist, there would be no escaping suffering. Consciousness of this new element would be like new consciousness, but that itself is still bound up in stresses since it is still dependent on based on the arising of more consciousness.
Well, hello, Simon. So while the Buddha did speak about Nibbana Dhatu, he did not speak about it in relationship to the other six elements. So the Nibbana Dhatu, as far as I can tell, is synonymous with sunyata. It's synonymous with emptiness. So that was addressed when I spoke about emptiness the other day. I just didn't use the term Nibbana Dhatu. So the practices that we're doing are approaching that same perception, but in a quite different way. So I'd rather not at this time go into a detailed description of Nibbana Dhatu because this is not quite the right time for it. But I think this evening at the 7:30 session, that might be a time if you want to come at that time and ask about Nibbana Dhatu, that would be a more suitable occasion for talking about it. Okay.
All right, thank you, Bhante. And hello, Suzanne. And Scott is saying, thanks, Bhante. I've only done 4 elements practice previously. Space was new to me. My experience was this. Knowing that solid matter is mostly empty space, my mind immediately dropped perception, dropped perception, and my perception was that of a continuum of empty space outside and inside my body. It wasn't that my solid body displaced or occupied empty space, it was part of it. Quite interesting and beautiful.
Yes, that's a good way to approach the perception of the space element, awareness of the space element. So in modern physics and chemistry, then they say that you're correct. What we think of as solid matter is actually almost entirely empty space. In fact, the closer you look at matter, the less solid it appears to be. The more closely you look, the less there is to look at. So yes, I've also found that quite helpful, recognizing that the body already is empty space. Okay.
And actually, proprioception is apparently proprioception. It means awareness of body, location of body.
Okay.
He says. And Marielle says, so thoughts and the imagination coexist with matter in space. That's where the line between solid and subjective disappears.
So when we talk about consciousness element in the afternoon session, then we'll address this issue. Space is technically still in the domain of the physical. where it starts to approach the nature of mind is because of how we perceive the space element, not because of what the space element is itself. The space element is still the physical world.
And Sally says, could Bhante explain about the part related when we feel the four elements, we release it and feel the space rather than elements?
Yeah, so again, it's like when you're looking at a painting. Initially, you're looking at the paint, and then you switch from looking at the paint to looking at the surface that the paint is on. So it's not that the paint disappears, but rather it's that it's not what you're paying attention to. You're paying attention to the surface, the underlying surface that the paint is on. So in the same way, we start with awareness of the body, in this case, through the lens of the four elements. But then we disregard the four elements and we pay attention to the space occupied by the body. So you can actually do this directly without going through the root of the four elements. This is a little more challenging, and it's easier if you already have some experience with the space element. You just start with a general awareness of your body and go directly to awareness of the space occupied by the body. So going directly to awareness of the body-shaped region of space. And then once you're aware of the body-shaped region of space, you can let go of the body shape and just be aware of space. That's a more direct way. Going through the root of the four elements is helpful because it makes sure that we're really clearly paying attention, that we're really clearly aware of the body, that we're really clearly aware of the space occupied by the body. So that then moving into the awareness of the space element is usually a bit easier. The other reason why going through the four elements is a bit easier is because, as I've mentioned a couple of times, the elements are arranged in order of subtlety. So starting from the most coarse, going to the most refined. So moving your attention through earth, water, fire, air is already moving in the direction of the space element. So earth, water, fire, air, space. It's just the natural next step in the process of moving from coarse to subtle.
Thank you. And Simon says, I did hear you talk on emptiness the other day. I connected it more with anatta at that time. I will come back later, no problem. I wasn't trying to stir anything up.
No problem, no problem. I'm not offended.
So that was also why I said it could cause some stress. So I think I was taking caution, and he put a little flower emoji.
Anyway, I really appreciate deep questions about deep topics. So don't be afraid to ask deep questions again in the future.
And Jerry says, when we got into the space element meditation, my mind kept reverting to focusing on one of the other four elements, earth, water, heat, air. But then Bhante prompted us to keep our awareness on the space element, which was really helpful. I did become acutely aware of the space that my body was occupying, but that space was always fluctuating by not having any border. Great meditation. Thank you.
Great. Good. Yeah, you're on the right track. Yeah, just keep at it. And as time goes by, it gets more familiar. It gets more easeful. But in the beginning, since it's something that we're quite unused to, it's quite challenging. So you just have to keep persisting and keep training your mind, and it gets easier.
And Melvin asks, one of my teachers is fond of saying that space is all one thing. The space inside your body and your room is the same space inside me and mine. It's all the same space. Is it helpful or is it silly?
Yeah, that's the same concept. Yeah. Yeah, that's basically the same as what I was saying earlier. So yeah, same.
All right, and that seems like it's all for now.
Okay. So please continue with your practice. So you can do some walking meditation and sitting meditation, focusing on the space element. If the space element seems inaccessible to you, then I recommend, as with the guidance, to move fairly quickly through the first four. So earth, water, fire, air, then space, to try to get you back into the space element. You can also use the method that the earlier person, I forget their name, mentioned, of recollecting that matter is empty space. Matter is already empty space. So you can use that if that helps you. But either way, keep trying to bring your mind to awareness of the space element. So its pervasiveness, its openness, its unobstructiveness, its borderlessness. Keep coming back to awareness of the space element. So then you can have lunch at around 11, take a little break or get back into your meditation practice as you see fit, and join in again at 1:30.
Okay, thank you. Sally has one last question, if that's okay. She says, thanks, Bhante. In the talk mentioned our body, you mentioned our body is moving in the space rapidly. Does this refer to the earth is rotating? Sorry if I asked a physical question.
Yeah, so the earth is spinning. So we're moving in that way. The earth is rotating around the sun. So we're moving in that way. The solar system is rotating within the galaxy. So we're moving in that way. The galaxy is rotating within the galactic cluster. So it's rotating in that way. And so on. So basically, we're moving really fast in several different directions at the same time, which all adds up to moving really fast in one direction. And I have no idea what direction that even is, because it gets really complicated and confusing. But suffice to say that we don't occupy the same region of space for 2 consecutive moments. That's the point that I was trying to make by that. We think that we're holding still, but we're not. We're actually hurtling very rapidly through space. So we don't, not only is it absurd to think that the space we're in belongs to us, we aren't even in the same space for 2 consecutive moments. That's the point I was trying to make.
All right, thank you so much. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Or as Adriana says, 3 empty sadhus. All right, well, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Keep up with your practice this morning, and we'll see you all at 1:30 p.m. And if you have any questions during your practice in the next couple of hours, write them down, and you can ask them at 1:30 p.m. when we'll meet again with Bhante, and we'll be studying consciousness.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, see you soon.